Welcome again to the session series on anatomy of food animals, EH 203.1. And now we are going to present to you session 3 on comparative anatomy of respiratory system. As I've done through the previous sessions, I'm going to introduce first to you to some of the basic features in the respiratory system that you covered very well in the human anatomy. And of interest are the two systems, the upper and the lower respiratory tract. And we are going to see some of the features in both of the systems that we can use to compare anatomy of these animals. And you are very aware of the physiology behind the inspiration, and then we have physiology around expiration. And these two are very important in knowing the lung capacity, and it involves a lot of things around that physiology. And now let's go into the upper respiratory system. Briefly, upper respiratory system includes the nostrils, the nasal cavity, and the pharynx. And in animals, in addition to the nostrils, we have something known as the muzzle. The muzzle is what holds the nostrils. This area here is known as the muzzle. It's what contains the nostrils, the nose, and the lips. Something to know is the horse's muzzle and the nostrils are soft and expandable. That's why horses sometimes wear rings here, or that rope that is tied to the horse for the riders is normally connected to this area of the muzzle. And in most cases they are very sensitive, and it contains many oil and sweat glands. In swine, the muzzle are very rigid. That's why it normally uses it as a horn. They're very rigid and do not contain any oil glands. But for the cattle and sheep, the muzzle do not contain oil gland, but it have the sweaty glands. And these sweaty glands are very important because in cattle, if the muzzle is dry, it's an indication of fever. There's a hard palate and a soft palate of the nasal cavity, which separates the nasal cavity and the mouth. And the nasal cavity is divided into two halves by a cartilage, and it connects the nostrils and the pharynx. Of importance about sinuses is that in horned cattle, sinuses are connected to these horns. And when these aged cattle are dehorned, that means we are exposing sinuses to infection. And then we have the lower respiratory tract. That's where most of the comparative anatomy is going to focus on. And this includes the larynx, the trachea, the bronchial tubes, and the lungs. The larynx is what regulates the volume of air passing through the trach. And in a normal dressed carcass, the larynx will normally remain with the head. It is not going together with the rest of the respiratory system known as the plaque. And these are the features of the larynx. They are the same as what we have in human: the cricoid cartilage, the thyroid cartilage, the epiglottic cartilage, and the arytenoid cartilages. All these cartilages are the ones which engineers or makes the larynx. And then we have the trachea and the lungs. The trachea, there are several features of the trachea that we are going to see that differentiate these species. And something to remember, most of ruminant animals have the apical bronchus, but in a horse there is no apical bronchus. So the lungs now, animals contain either lobulated or unlobulated lungs. That's something unique. In some animals, they have lobes, but those lobes are not clearly differentiated among themselves. We call them in distinct lobulation. And size also differs in terms of the left and right lung. The right lung is almost larger than the left one. And they are divided into varying lobes, and these lobes also differ in terms of number and how lobulated they are. So let's go back now to the comparative anatomy among these systems. Let's start with the trachea and lungs. We won't talk much of the upper respiratory system because they always look similar. They have a nose, they have the muzzle, they have the nostrils. All those exist in all animals, except with those few features that I presented to you about the muzzle. For the trachea and lungs, as you can see here, this is ox's trachea. You can see how much lobulated it is. You can see in the left, there are 3 lobes, the first one, the second, and the third. And on the right, there are 5 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4. But the 5th one is not that much clear here. But sometimes they have 4 or 5 depending on the age of the animal. And then we have these as accessory bronchus, which connects to the apical lobe that we didn't have in a horse. So here, lobulation is clearly indicated. That's why we call it lobulation is well marked. Weight varies from 2.5 to 3 kilograms. On ox, we have something here known as the dorsal ridge, which doesn't exist in some of the animal species. Here we're going to see later. As well, in pig, the dorsal ridge can be clearly seen here as well. In addition, we have something that interretinoid cartilage here that we didn't have in ox. The lobes, we have 3 lobes on the left, and we have 3 or 4 lobes on the right side. We also have the accessory bronchus and the apical lobe. In contrary to the ox, pig's lungs are very compressible, and lobulation here existed. It is very obvious. And weight also varies from 360 grams to 450 grams. For the horse, you can see here, we don't have that ridge here, the apical ridge. And lobulation here is not very distinct. All right, there are lobes. You can see this is a lobe, this is a lobe, this is a lobe, but they are not clearly separated among themselves. So we say lobulation here is not very distinct. So there are 2 lobes on the left, and at the right there are 3 lobes, but you don't have deep features to differentiate them. A much longer trachea here than in ox, and weight is also variable, and you can see here we don't have accessory bronchus to go towards the apical lobe. And we have the deer lungs, larynx, and trachea as well. Here we have lobulation, but it's not very distinct because, as you can see, this lobe and this lobe, these are 2 lobes, but how separated they are you can see as well. On the left side, these are 2 different lobes, but they're not well separated. As you can see here, separation is clear, but here it's not. So trachea is relatively longer here as compared to sheep, and there is no tracheal ridge here as well, and lung consistency is not so dense as it was in sheep. It is in sheep. Sheep now, we say trachea is very similar to ox, but of course it's smaller because it's a smaller species of animal. Its length is about 22 to 25 centimeters. The inner diameter or the caliber is 1.5 centimeters. Consistency is more dense and leathery to touch. Lobulation here is also indistinct. That means lobes are not clearly separated among each other. And the weight also varies from 350 to 1 gram. And I thought maybe this might be of interest. Birds don't have expandable lungs. This is a very important thing to note. They don't have expandable lungs. That means the physiology of inspiration and expiration in birds doesn't expand their lungs. However, to assist with that, God gave them the accessory air sacs. These ones, which are what aids help birds during the respiration. And in chicken, for instance, there are 8 accessory air sacs, and the perforation in their long bones as well help in making them lighter, being able to fly. So these briefly are the features that you can use to differentiate animal species based on their respiratory system. Thank you very much.